Can we move the, Matt wants us a little bit closer together. Okay, cool.
Did you take a COVID test?
I took a COVID test.
All right.
Yeah, we're not too close. Great, well, many of you know Jerry Colonna. If you don't know Jerry Colonna, and if you haven't read his book, Reboot, you're missing out, and it's a great opportunity. Jerry has an incredible personal story himself. He has gone through many iterations of life, and
Does that mean I'm old?
it might mean that you're experienced.
Okay.
You're a man of a certain amount of experience. And on top of that has come out in the most recent iteration as a true advocate for the entrepreneur and for the journey that the entrepreneur is going through. I mentioned this morning that all my stuff got stolen last night. One of the things that got stolen last night was my copy of Jerry's book that I'd very diligently noted up and highlighted. And I had all these really interesting questions I was going to ask Jerry based on, page this and page that and so on. And that's all gone. So we're going to be testing my memory. We're going to be inviting you to ask questions as well as we go through this. But why don't we start off, Jerry? So first, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming out. And I'm just going to take a minute.
Yeah.
And I'm COVID wary, so I've not hugged or shaken hands. So I love you, but my germs are going to stay over here. So that's part of what's going on. I had COVID 3 or 4 weeks ago, and still getting over it, even though I was double vaxxed and double boosted. So I'm just cognizant of all of that.
Sure, by all means. So we've talked about a number of things today. We've talked about awareness. We've talked about worthiness. We've talked about the entrepreneur's journey, the things that we are going through. One of the things that comes up that I know you talk about in the book, and I know that you talk about with folks, is what we're really all trying to answer is this question of, am I okay? Mm-hmm. Right? I'm doing all these things, and I'm, writing blogs and building a business and raising money and running around and spinning wheels and making sales and so on and so forth. And I'm really trying to answer the question, am I okay? What do I need to do to feel okay inside, to feel like I belong inside?
Well, I think Abby gave us a really great understanding of what is necessary. And I'm going to actually do it right now. Right now, I feel fucking tired of white supremacy. I'm really fucking tired. And I'm really tired and heartbroken at gun violence. And it feels hard. So to build on Alex's point, I could come up here and sit on the stage and be the sage on the stage and pretend that my heart isn't broken, but I am too fucking old to do that. And as Abby pointed out, that's actually the pathway to feel worse. It's a dumpster fire of a world right now. We have a damn land war in Europe. We have an insane fight over what's this week? Baby formula? Are you kidding me? Last week, was it last week's devastation that the Supreme Court feeling was leaked? Who the hell knows what they're going to actually decide? Feels relentless. Does it feel relentless to you guys? Parasympathetic nervous system reset, AKA deep breath. I don't know how any other way to show up than to acknowledge the reality of what I'm feeling in the moment to myself. so that I can actually land here, be with you, and do what it is that we're here to do. Because otherwise that other stuff just hangs around. So I completely lost your question. But I needed to say all that, and I appreciate your indulging me in being able to say all that.
Yeah. Well, we spend a lot of time running, spinning, bombarded by news, bombarded by information, so much going on, feeling so many demands. And we know that if we don't take care of ourselves, we're going to burn out. Something's going to happen. Something negative is going to happen. But at the same time, we keep pushing, we're burning the candle at both ends, we're just constantly running around.
Well, the irony, Alex, right, is the reason that we're constantly running around is that we're afraid that something bad is going to happen. And then something bad happens. I mean, it's kind of perverse if you think about it. But it's actually quite logical if you're a 5-year-old. Because it's the logic of a 5-year-old, isn't it? And that's not an accident. Because we learned that when we were munchkins. We learned it by watching, and we learned it by emulating and doing. We began to associate doing with meaning and with the reassurance that we're worthy of love, safety, and belonging. If I get the A, if I work faster, if I say my prayers at night, then mommy and daddy might stop fighting. As I like to say, we came by this belief system honestly. But the programming, when we become adults, hasn't been updated. Perhaps, as Abby pointed out, because our brain is dragging us around chasing dopamine and oxytocin and all those other wonderful chemicals. Anyway.
And we don't know, I mean, the point is, I suffer from this. I think a lot of us in this room suffer from this. We don't update the software, right? So the hardware is getting updated, right? Because I'm doing all the things that I do to update my hardware, and the software itself.
Yeah, we get old.
Yeah, we're getting old. That's called updating the hardware. Is getting old, and the software is the same, and it's stuck in. Oh, I'm a child. I need to understand the rules. That's how I think about it. I think, hey, I need to know the rules of the game. What's going on here so that I can play it the best? That's what I need to figure out. And we're still doing that, even though we're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or more.
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity that you all have today and tomorrow, which is to really hang out with that word conscious. And what does it mean to be conscious in this way? Sometimes I fear a little bit that it's like the word mindful. It's like the fancy health club version of, 4,000 years old, 4,000 years of mindful training, mind training. It's really hip. One level that I would encourage you to think about, and I think there's a lot of discussion about this, is there's a form of consciousness, and in Buddhist thinking, there's 7 layers of consciousness. Think about that. One form is, what am I feeling right now? What am I doing right now? And I sort of demonstrated a little bit of that check-in. But another layer is, how does it serve me? How does it serve me to not update the programming? How does it serve me to be afraid of boredom? And I'll give you a hint to the answer. You ready? You ready? You ready? It keeps you safe. It keeps you from feeling the things you don't want to feel, from remembering the things you don't want to remember, from re-experiencing the things you don't want to re-experience. How many engineers, software engineers, are in the room? Okay, so if we think about this, and I call it in my book, I call it subroutines. If we think about this in one way, is we are a set of applications. Now imagine I give you the task, Mariano, I give you the task of rebuilding the application. But I say to you, do not touch the subroutines. Do not change anything below the surface level. This sort of builds on Abby's point before. You'll patch it. It'll be a piece of spaghetti when you're done. And the first real crisis, the thing will break. So that second layer of consciousness is absolutely essential to transformation. And I'll say it again. How does it serve me? And if you want an extra credit, does it serve me any longer? Because chances are it did serve you, but it no longer serves you. So a long-winded response.
It kept me safe when I was a kid because I think it prevented X, Y, Z, or because I got positive reinforcement or accolades or good grades or smiles,
the dopamine or the oxytocin or the endorphins, right.
And I learned that programming and I'm still carrying it around, but now I'm 46 years old and it doesn't really apply anymore, but I don't seem to have perspective on that. I don't know that.
That's right.
I'm carrying around the grading system thinking that someone else is grading my life.
That's right.
And that's because, as entrepreneurs, who's grading our life? The press is grading our life, right? Oh, I got a press release out that we did this, right?
Or investors.
Investors are grading my life. Customers are grading my life. My team, how big is my team? How happy is my team? Am I an employer of choice in Colorado? You know, all this kind of stuff. Those are all ways that I seek external validation, right? Did I get that? Am I on that list? Am I on the 30 under 30? Oh no, shit, I didn't make that one. Well, I got 10 years to make the 40 under 40. I don't even know if they do one anymore at my age. I don't think there's a 50 under 50, is there? I don't think they care anymore. Yeah.
I'm going for the 60 under 60.
60 under 60, yes. Everybody here is in the 100 under 100 club. Congratulations. So we take that because we want external validation, but we do that because something isn't right inside.
Right.
And what are we afraid of? What is it that we're avoiding?
I think we avoid, I said before, safety. I think we avoid shame. Some of us grew up with physical violence, and so sometimes we are afraid of physical violence. Some of us grew up with violent speech. Lots of yelling, lots of tension, unresolved suffering. But I think in the end, I think what we are afraid of is a kind of existential threat that our personhood, our very right to exist on the planet, is challenged. I'm operating with an assumption right now as I look out over this room, and I'll share the assumption. The assumption is that most of us in the room identify sort of on the spectrum of white. And you can feel what I'm talking about, that existential threat. Now, just for a moment, to the best of your ability, especially if you identify as male and cisgendered and straight, feel that threat. and imagine, just for a moment, not being in a dominator class. And imagine the persistent anxiety that Abby so well spoke about. Imagine that. In Buddhism, we talk about the wisdom of bodhicitta, which is the open heart. And I often think of it as the broken open heart. Imagine feeling that unsafe every day in most circumstances. Anyway, I'm on a rant there. I apologize.
By all means, this is important stuff. We think, so we as a group of entrepreneurs, we think, oh, I've got all this stuff going on in my life, and I'm pushing, and I'm putting myself out there, and for many of us, especially early days, solopreneurs, it's like the ultimate test of what you're just saying of, hey, am I worthy? Do I belong here? I'm creating a thing, I'm building a this or that, or starting a company. This is me, it's a reflection of me. What if the world doesn't love me? What if what I do doesn't work out? I'm bad, I'm a failure, I don't belong, I don't deserve. And so we're walking this tightrope, right? Of like going between, I want to put my energy into it, I want to do it, I got a lot of enthusiasm to get stuff done, and if it doesn't work out, it's not because of macroeconomics or something totally outside of my control, it's because of me. I am not good enough, worthy enough, deserving, and here. And we're constantly walking that rope and trying to stay on the right, or trying not to fall off is essentially what we're trying to do. And when we personalize, remember this morning I said, when I one of the major hiccups I had was I would personalize everything. Good news, bad news. It's like, oh, this is all a reflection of me. And it's not. And so how can I then understand that stuff's happening in the world and at the same time understand it's not all about me?
There's a passage in my book in which I liken our experience as being on that roller coaster of emotion. Hey, how are you? It's like my brain is just like beginning to regulate. Oh, that I know that one and that. And I think about that experience all the time, from an entrepreneur's perspective, that is our experience, right? Yay, we made the sale. Oh, turns out the product doesn't work. Oh, fuck. Right, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. That's our experience. But the truth is, that's actually how life works, right? That's what we do, is we ride that roller coaster. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And part of the energy that puts us in the seat of that Coney Island cyclone roller coaster is to do what Alex was just describing, which was to outsource our sense of worth, self-worth, to other people, to other actions, to other experiences. We are trained as children to strive for that A, for the sake of having it posted on the refrigerator, and the love, safety, and belonging that flows from that experience. And so we ride this roller coaster up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And part of the challenge, and it happens when we do things like Conscious Entrepreneur Summit or Conscious Business or mindfulness that or mindful this, is that we tell ourselves that I should not do that, right? I should not think this way. And then we struggle. And so then we feel bad about ourselves. This is the problem I have with most self-help, is that it sets this bar for performance that most of us as human beings will fail to achieve. And it ends up called, the self-denigration section of the bookstore. It's like, it's not.
Well, a lot of people think it's fast, that I should be able to listen to a podcast or like put, just have like a couple of sentences around or just have some burst of inspiration. That's going to solve my problem. Not
Right,
realizing
but
it's a life of work.
Yeah, the transformation doesn't happen that way. Just like learning doesn't happen that way. It's a slow, slow, slow process. And that's really hard. Because as you've all learned, and you'll learn more over the next day and a half, human beings want to be distracted. We get a lot of reward out of being distracted. But how do we learn? It's a combination. How do we transform? It's a combination of insight, flash of insight, and repetition. Flash of insight, repetition. With a hell of a lot of self-compassion and forgiveness in between. I yelled at my team again. I didn't really mean to. All right, what are you going to do about it? Hint, hint, you can apologize. You could make an empathetic connection and say to them, hey, listen, I was having a really bad weekend and I'm sorry I lost my shit and and I get scared, and when I get scared I turn to anger because you know what, that's how I was trained as a kid. That's cool. That's how they were trained. Okay, now you're together. Now go back and repair. Anyway.
Yeah. And so you talk about broken open heart. I've also heard you say before that most teams and companies are made up of heartbroken misfits. I assume there's probably some of those heartbroken misfits in the room, but maybe we don't identify as heartbroken misfits. So I'm curious if we can unpack what that means and what that looks like.
Who remembers Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Okay. My favorite part, aside from Herbie who wanted to be the dentist, right? I'm going to be a dentist, was the Island of Misfit Toys, including the red caboose with square wheels, right? I don't know about you, Mariano. I'm going to pick on you because I know you. But I felt empathetic connection to the Island of Misfit Toys. That's where I belonged. Because I'm an Italian-American guy from Brooklyn who cries at the drop of a hat. I am so freaking weird. Right? The wind blows. It's climate change. So I like to think of teams as islands of misfit toys. And maybe part of your effort is to create a sense of what I like to refer to as systemic belonging for everybody on that team. What if your job, how many CEOs in the room? Okay, the majority. Other people managers. Okay, what if your job as a leader wasn't merely creating return on investment? Wasn't merely creating great products and services? But was to push up against systemic othering? So these magnificent misfits who believe in your mission and purpose feel once and for all that they belong. Just hold that image in mind. What if we change the definition of great leadership from output, return on investment, from share price, from cash in the bank, from the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, to how did you make people feel? Did you give them a sense that they got to do the best work of their lives? That they got challenged, they were held accountable, they had structures that made sense? What's going to happen to your profitability? What's going to happen to your NPS score? What's going to happen to your customer service satisfaction ratings? What's going to happen when your employees are recruited to go work someplace else? So there are all these sort of baser motivations for doing it. But imagine you step into a kind of conscious leadership that puts at the heart of why you do what you do so that the red caboose can feel really good despite having square wheels. What a fucking awesome place to work. That was a pretty good riff. I just thought
That was a great riff. That was a great riff. One of the things that you highlight is the introspection tools, I'll call it that. And there's a number of questions in the book that you encourage people to ask of themselves, especially as they're going through, like getting, this is the art of growing up part, is asking a series of questions. I wonder if you want to share what those are, if we can talk about those.
Well, I think the one that most people seem to respond to, and I wish that I got a penny for every instance it was repeated on Instagram and Twitter, I'd be very wealthy, was something that actually I took from my longtime psychoanalyst, Dr. Sayers, which goes like this: how have I been complicit in creating the conditions I say I don't want?
How have I been complicit in creating the conditions which I say I don't want?
Right. Now, this is an important question. This is not permission for self-denigration. Please do not weaponize interior self-analysis. That is one of the first impulses, is to turn around and say, Jesus, look at what I've been doing. No. Easy. Curiosity, not chastisement. And there are a couple of words in there that are really important. Complicit, not responsible. Complicit means I'm an accomplice. When there's a bank stick-up job, you're driving the getaway car. You're not sticking the gun through the bank teller's window. Okay? Because as we said before, many of the programs we learned as children, we learned to keep us safe. In many instances, we inherited that programming from people who might even had physical threats to them. I'm thinking about all the children, grandchildren, great-children of Holocaust survivors. So when grandma and mom told you, do this, it was coming from that place. Okay? Complicit. The second piece is, I say I don't want this. I don't want to be so busy, yet I do it anyway. And that's where that first inquiry line starts to come in. How does it serve me to be so busy? Oh, it makes me feel really productive. Boop. To Abby's point, dopamine hit, I feel good. And I'm depleted.
But I don't have to think about anything.
So I get busy. Get busy, getting busy, getting busy, getting busy, getting busy. So my word for those things is radical self-inquiry. It's radical because we're organized not to look. And you've got a bunch of really talented people here whose job it is to hold you gently but firmly with accountability to say, can we look at what you're doing? Because you're doing that thing you said you didn't want to do. Even though you said you don't want to create the conditions but you're doing that thing that you did. So, there are other questions, but.
Those are good ones. I mean, it's a great place to start. If all we did was answer that question, looking at that one, we could spend a long, long time doing so, I think, and
Indeed.
probably be really enlightened by the answers.
Indeed.
So, I was at the very first CEO boot camp that you ran in 2013, before it was even called Reboot, before it was even a thing.
Before Reboot launched.
Before it was even a thing. And it was 12 of us up in the mountains in Colorado for a weekend, 3 days. And that has now morphed into a very powerful program. And what I'm curious about is, what have you learned and what have you seen from working with so many CEOs in those raw, vulnerable moments? And what have you seen to be the things that are most prevalent, or the things that trip people up the most? Because you're working with CEOs in broad spectrum, where they are in their businesses, how far along they are, et cetera. But you've now seen hundreds go through. And I'm just curious, what patterns have you pulled out about this? And what are you seeing that are the most common self-sabotage or avoidable self-sabotage?
Well, the first thing that occurs to me doesn't answer that second question about self-sabotage.
Okay.
The very, very first thing occurs to me, and I'm going to pick on Mariano because he accosted me earlier today, and he had just come from one of our boot camps a few weeks ago. And Mariano, that's right, you were at the boot camp too.
Eric was there too?
Yeah.
How many people in the room have been to a boot camp? One of Jerry's. David? Nicole? Eric? Okay.
Eric. Right. Yeah. What's the matter with the rest of you? And you said, I'm going to put words in your mouth, I hope you don't mind. Our stories are similar. Is that a fair statement? You could shout it out. Yeah. What was it you actually said?
That we are brothers.
That we are brothers. And he's feeling it, so hold him in your heart right now. So you asked, Alex, what is the one thing I learned? So it's not enough to just simply say out loud, you are not alone. I gotta go over. Sure. You're not alone. I see you. I feel you. Right here, brother. The most important thing that I learned, that we've learned, is the veracity and the intensity and the power of realizing we're not alone. Can I tell a quick little story about this?
By all means.
So Reboot, the book, came out in June 2019. In August 2019, I did a talk here in Denver. Eric, I think you were there for that. And before I walked into the venue, this older white woman, maybe in the 80s, came over to me and she said, "You look like our speaker." And I said, "Well, that's because I am your speaker." And she said to me, "I want you to understand something. Your story is my story. My name is Margaret. I grew up in the Depression. My family survived the Dust Bowl, southeastern Colorado." It's like, what the?
Yeah,
I'm
right.
from Brooklyn.
Sounds right.
How could, a few months later, I'm in Dublin, Ireland. I'm doing a book reading. I'm talking about the experience that people have when they're early parentified because they have an absent or emotionally unavailable parent. And I'm talking about the tight correlation with those folks growing up and becoming leaders. Like y'all. And at the very end, black woman came up to me. Now, this is Ireland, okay? There are a lot of blonde-haired people in the room. This woman comes up to me. Her name is Joy. And she says to me, that thing that you talked about, that happened to me. And your story is my story. And so I said, okay, I'm starting to feel this way. And then she says, my father was absent when I was 13. And I'm like, okay. I'm in that, I'm in the speaker zone, sort of barely there. And then she says, he was killed on Robben Island, which is where Nelson Mandela was held. And he was a freedom fighter for the African National Congress, living in Zimbabwe, crossing the border, when he was captured and then killed. And she and her siblings emigrated to Ireland. The most remarkable experience that I've had, the most remarkable lesson I've learned, is how freaking universal these feelings are. Every one of our stories is different. As a Buddhist teacher once said to me, we're like fingers on the hand. Every finger is unique and different. But where does the finger end and the hand begin? When you take a bunch of burned out, stressed out entrepreneurs who are freaking out because they're not going to get a term sheet, or they got a term sheet and now they're freaked out because how are they going to end? And you put them in a room and you help them understand that they're not alone and viscerally feel that, you're doing a mitzvah. You're doing a good deed. Because you're alleviating that second arrow. The first arrow, we get shot. Oh, it's just a terrible experience. The second arrow is, and I'm the only one who feels like shit. It's just not true. But because as children we're socialized to not actually talk about the feelings, we suffer in silence. So the most important thing, and this is in the new book I'm working on, your story is my story. My story is your story. That's what I felt, Mariano, when you came up to me and said, you're like my brother. And when you feel seen and heard, you can withstand so much more. Because that roller coaster is fucking relentless.
Thank you. I am curious what questions the audience has for Jerry. Maybe we can get a mic runner to bring a mic around. Nick, would you do that, please?
Has anybody seen that square, that soft square that you toss around?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
That's great.
All right, year two, note to
I saw
self.
a hand up there.
Looks like Sonia over here.
The man with the mic who just ran over there, what's your first name? Nick. Are you going to count your steps? Yeah, right.
Check, check.
Okay.
All right. There
All right. Yeah.
Okay, Jerry, great to see you again. It's
Hey,
been a
Sonia,
number of years.
That's why I didn't hug you.
I'm totally cool with it. I got the smile. I actually have a couple questions that come to mind. One is, I've worked with founders my whole entire life, and I'm starting to see this sort of, I don't know if we want to call them movement yet, but founders recognizing the need to become more embodied in their own, in their own self. And then, vulnerability comes into that, and, I think a lot of founders like you guys are learning to be more in tune with your emotions. And given all the founders that you work with, I'm curious as to what you're seeing as the output from a company standpoint. So how does that transform culture? How does it make employees more inspired by the leader that they signed up to work with? So that's one question I can hold. Or
Yeah, hold the second
Okay,
one,
perfect.
because otherwise I'll just get lost in my own thoughts. Sonia, how did it feel when I opened up and I told you how I was actually doing? My broken.
Connected.
What's that?
Connected.
So in that moment, I had a lot of power. Because I'm on the stage, and you're all sitting there. So there's something extraordinary when the person in the room who has the most power goes first. It changes the tone and tenor. Did anybody else feel connected the way Sonia just described? Right. That creates a bond. The problem is that when we assume power, when we take on the power that more often than not is projected upon us, we start story making. And the story is, I have to be infallible. I can't actually have any doubts. Because if I admit any of those things, though, and I don't like the word vulnerability, because of its association with a weakness. If I say that wall is vulnerable, I mean I can punch it. Okay? I want to transform that to honest. I mean, true feeling here. If I had plunged in and just did my shtick without acknowledging the world as it is and my own relationship to that world, you might feel less connected to me. Because I wouldn't be fully present. Does that? Okay.
I think my second question was just around, you had mentioned that transformation takes time, like a long fucking time. So for those of us that are sort of stuck
for 33 years, I don't know what you're talking about.
So I feel like I've been stuck in this sort of transformation for quite some time, and creating space and taking courses and self-learning and growing, and I still don't have the fucking answers. So it's like, how do you create the space to recognize that the time will come, but it may come next week, and it may come 2 years from now, it may be 20 years from now.
David Mandel, what am I doing? He's seen this move before. It's like Sonia's like, oh shit, he's coming close. I'm not going to get down on my knees in front of you, because that's usually the signal that makes people cry. Okay. Sonia. How about this? Natasha. How does Sonia feel about Sonia? Say it again. I've been working for so long.
Well, just knowing that you're in this transformation and wanting to find the answers, but knowing you need to create the space, and if you create the space, you can find the answers, but then you cycle and you're 3 years later and you still don't have the answers.
How does she feel about herself?
A little exasperated.
A little exasperated. Do you hear the self-denigration going on? You hear the negative self-talk inside of it? Feel that in your body. Have you ever had those feelings? Have you ever not had those feelings? Okay, easy, Sonia. Easy. We don't weaponize the work. Can't help it, sorry. What's the negative consequence? Let's play with the thought process, Sonia. I'm going to give voice to some feelings. Could be completely wrong. I'm never going to change. Does that have any resonance? Oh, okay, feel it. Never going to change. What's going to happen if I never change? What's going to happen to Sonia if Sonia never changes? What she's going to feel?
Buried in negativity.
Buried in negativity. And what happens to love, safety, and belonging Is that going to be yours? Just feel that. You've been helping entrepreneurs for a long time. Let's imagine that Sonia's sitting right here in the chair. What do you want to say to Sonia? I'm never going to feel. You hear it? What would you say to Sonia? Is it possible that she's going to be able to transform? Abby taught us that to deal with the feelings, we don't stuff them down, we actually go into the feeling. That's what I'm trying to do with her right now. And the reason I got close is to create an empathetic and sympathetic bond so that our physical bodies could come into relationship. And Sonia, you know you're safe with me. Right? Was there a third question? I hope you don't mind me jumping off the stage
Oh,
here.
we'll
I was
keep going
getting
for a
little
few more
bored.
minutes. We'll keep going for a few more minutes. Who else has a question?
Other question?
Ariel, yeah.
Hi, Jerry. I'm Ariel.
Hi.
I admire you from afar, so
Oh, I admire you from afar.
I'm a little starstruck
Good social
right now.
COVID distance. That's what it is.
So you came on and shared. I'm honestly where I'm at right now is I am sick of white supremacy and what's going on in the world. And I am an executive coach and I work with purpose-driven leaders who really want to make a difference in the world. And a common question that comes up for them and for me too is like, if I'm pursuing the thing I care most about, the thing I'm passionate about, what is my role in also caring about everything else that's happening in the world? Like, am I doing enough if I'm putting all my time and energy and focus into the one thing that I care so deeply about? And then all this other shit is happening. What time and attention should I be giving to that as well? And yeah.
I hear you, Ariel, and thank you for doing the work you're doing, and thank you for feeling the feelings that you're feeling. So I've been grappling intensely with some of these questions, and I mentioned I'm actually halfway through a new book that's due. Oh fuck! It was originally due in June. It's going to be September. My editor knows that, but you know that's kind of the way shit works. And in Reboot, I make the assertion that better humans make better leaders. And I think that that is still true. I still believe that that's true. But it's insufficient. Because the new version of the question, how have I been complicit, is this: how have I been complicit in and benefited from the conditions in the world I say I don't want to have? How have I benefited? So there's a two-step process. You cannot skip that first radical self-inquiry process, because otherwise you will tip into irrelevant self-denigration that takes you out of the fucking action. So you still have to do the work of growing the hell up and really confronting the demons that you were running away from as children to stay safe. But you can't stop there. You have to lean into the second half of that question, which kind of goes, to what end? To what end? My daughter, who identifies as half white, half Asian, was one of the thousands who protested the murder of George Floyd. And when she was texting me from the middle of a protest, and I had to give her instructions on how to deal with being pepper sprayed, I realized I hadn't done enough. As she famously said to me, it's not enough to be an ally. You have to be a co-conspirator. Those of us who are privileged and have power have to use the power to push against the systemic othering that has actually benefited us. So, I'm not suggesting that you should give up your companies. You have important work to do, whatever it is that you're doing. But I am suggesting you cannot lose sight of this. Consciousness, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, as a human, as an adult, is not about just feeling better. It's about feeling better so that you can actually make a positive dent in the universe, so that you can do something, so that at the end of your days, you can say, I tried. Just this weekend, I wrote the first draft of the introduction of the book because I'm halfway through and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing with this book? I don't know. And I wrote a line, I may fail, but I'll be damned if I don't try. And too many of us who hold power and privilege don't try because we're afraid of failing. And I don't know how we can call ourselves better leaders if we don't try. It's not enough to put more money in the bank. So, Ariel, I went off on my rant. I want to make sure I got to you. Was that helpful?
Yes, thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome.
All right, let's
back to you.
one more question, please. Yeah, please.
So my name's Lisa Gonzalez. I am an EOS implementer, and so I coach amazing entrepreneurs like you all the time. And I am often asked by really, I'm married to an Irish white person from Wisconsin, and like I say,
Claire?
but sorry, I'm sorry, but so a couple of things. The conversation around privilege, even for me. I mean, I used to be a lawyer. I have a very safe suburban life in the tech center as well, and our kids are half white, half Puerto Rican. But nonetheless, I realized you just get really safe. You become afraid of stepping more in. So yes, I'm an ally, and I realize obviously with the past, as when a certain president got into office, and now you have to start stepping up a little bit more. And so some of my clients ask me, what can I do? And I want, I'm always often in a room with 6 or 7 white guys. That's my life right now. And it's always been. When I was a lawyer, the same thing. There's a book called So You Want to Talk About Race.
Yes.
And it's really good because often we don't know. I mean, this conference is about taking action, right? It's all well and good to sit here but I like to take action. And so the book's called So You Want to Talk About Race. And it just talks about if you want to be a person in action, here are some of the things you can do. So if you're upset about politically, here are some of the things you can do. If you're upset about X, Y, Z, these are the things you can do. So it kind of gives a great background and perspective and it's written by this awesome author. I can't remember her name right now, but so it gives some context, then shows you the action you can take. And if anyone's interested, because I know your heart is in such a beautiful place, but often I feel what do you do next? And that's a great place I have found for me anyway, to start.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Lisa. And it's really important, and it's a great book. And I've been down the rabbit hole of a lot of books associated with this, and I think it's incredibly important to really turn one eye inward and sort of say, what's going on for me, but then also stay focused on the external. What actions am I taking? You know, one of my teachers is a guy named Parker Palmer. He's a dear, dear friend, and he has an image that I'll give you, and maybe we'll close with that. And that is, he calls it the tragic gap. And the tragic gap is the gap between the world that we know is possible and the world as it is. And what he says is that if we give over only to the world as it is, we give up and we give over to corrosive cynicism. But if we only live in the world that is possible, we give over to irrelevant idealism. And so the challenge is that we're called to stand in the tragic gap, because either side of that gap takes us out of the action. And the world needs our action. It needs our bodies on the line. It needs us taking steps. It needs us standing up, using platforms, amplifying voices that would otherwise be marginalized, and speak up and speak out consistently. And books like So You Want to Talk About Race give us a roadmap for responding. Because it's not enough to just do our own work. That's really important. We actually have to externalize it.
Great. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.